there is a tragic silence that hovers over the history of American music. It is the silence of a trapped man. In the scorching summer of 1968, Elvis Presley was staring into the dark abyss of his own erasure. He was only 33 years old, but to the rest of the world, he was already a ghost, a relic of the past. To understand the immense stakes of that fateful year, we have to travel back to a time when the king of rock and roll was losing his crown. For nearly a decade, Elvis had been living in a golden cage. His manager, a ruthless, cold-hearted former carnival barker named Colonel Tom Parker, had made a calculated deal with the corporate executives of Hollywood. He signed Elvis up for movie after movie, year after year. At first, it seemed like a dream, but it quickly turned into a creative nightmare. Elvis was forced into mindless, cheap musical comedies. Studios cared only about the box office, not the art. They made him sing to dogs. They made him drive race cars in fake scenery. They put him in ridiculous, colorful costumes that stripped away every ounce of his original, dangerous edge. The money coming in was immense. Millions of dollars poured into Graceland. But the price Elvis paid was heartbreaking. The raw, wild rebel from Memphis, who had terrified parents, ignited a cultural revolution, and changed the world in 1956, had been sanitized, packaged, and systematically turned into a corporate joke. Meanwhile, the world outside the Hollywood studios was changing at a blinding, terrifying speed. The streets of America were filled with political unrest and anti-war protests. The airwaves were completely dominated by a new breed of artists. The heavy, poetic, and revolutionary rock of the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, and the Rolling Stones was defining a generation. Music had become the voice of a restless society. And where was Elvis? Elvis was stuck in a recording studio, tracking assembly line soundtrack songs that nobody under the age of 30 cared about. He knew it, and it was eating him alive from the inside out. He would spend his nights locked in lonely hotel rooms, listening to these new, vibrant bands on the radio. He felt a deep, agonizing irrelevance. He was the king, but he was ruling over an empty kingdom of plastic movies and forgotten melodies. He wanted out. He needed a miracle. And that was exactly when a dangerous opportunity presented itself. The miracle came in the form of a television offer. The NBC network wanted Elvis for a winter broadcasting special. Colonel Tom Parker saw this as a simple, highly profitable holiday marketing tool. The Colonel's plan was traditional, commercial, and incredibly safe. Elvis would wear a nice, cozy Christmas sweater. He would stand next to a fake, decorated fireplace, and he would sing traditional holiday carols for an hour. It was meant to be a sweet, harmless family show. But then, Elvis met a young, brilliant, and fiercely independent television director named Steve Binder. Binder wasn't afraid of the Colonel, and he wasn't intimidated by the myth of Elvis. Binder looked the king directly in the eyes during their first meeting and spoke the brutal truth that no one else in Hollywood dared to say. He said, "Elvis, your career is in the toilet. If you do this safe, boring Christmas special, you are finished forever." Those harsh, honest words woke up the sleeping giant. For the first time in his adult life, Elvis felt the old fire return to his blood. He made a terrifying, monumental decision. He was going to rebel against the man who controlled him. Elvis refused the Christmas sweaters. He refused the fake fireplace. Instead, he ordered a custom-made, tight outfit of pure black leather. He wanted to go back to the beginning. He wanted to recreate the sweat, the noise, and the raw energy of his early days. He decided he would sit in a small circle, completely unplugged, with his old bandmates, and perform live. When Colonel Parker discovered this secret plan, the backstage rooms became a literal war zone. The Colonel screamed at the producers. he threatened to cancel the entire production. He claimed that Elvis was destroying his clean, family-friendly brand. The weight on Elvis's shoulders during those rehearsal weeks was unimaginable. He had not performed in front of a live, breathing audience in over 7 long years. He was terrified that the teenagers of 1968 would look at him and laugh. He knew that if he failed on national television, his legacy would die right there on that stage. On the night of the recording, the atmosphere in the NBC studio was thick with anxiety. Seconds before the curtains were scheduled to rise, Elvis was paralyzed backstage. His chest was tight. His breathing was shallow. His hands were shaking so violently that he could barely grip the neck of his guitar. He looked at Steve Binder, realizing that everything he had ever built, everything he was, hung in the balance. But when the stage lights finally flashed on, something ancient, primitive, and unstoppable took over his body. He stepped out onto that small stage, completely surrounded by a dense crowd sitting just inches away from him. And he unleashed a fury that America had not witnessed in a decade. He growled, he sweated, he slung his guitar like a weapon. It wasn't just a concert, it was a man fiercely fighting for his survival. Yet the true, immortal climax of this historic rebellion did not happen during the loud rock and roll segments. The year 1968 was one of the darkest, most tragic chapters in American history. The nation was bleeding from its soul. Only weeks before the production, Martin Luther King Jr. was brutally assassinated in Memphis, Elvis's own home territory. A short time later, Senator Robert F. Kennedy was shot down. The country was fractured, crying out in immense pain, confusion, and division. Elvis was deeply broken by these national tragedies. He wanted his voice to stand for something real. He wanted to heal the people who loved him. He asked his musical director to secretly write a new song, a song that would reflect the grief and the desperate hope of the American people. The result was a powerful, soulful track called "If I Can Dream." When Colonel Tom Parker heard the demo tape of the song, he flew into a rage. He shouted at the crew, "That is not an Elvis song. It is political. It is dangerous. We are not putting it on the air." For the first time in his entire life, Elvis stood his ground against the colonel. He looked at his manager and said quietly, but firmly, "I am singing it." For the grand finale of the show, Elvis stood completely alone on a vast, dark stage. Behind him, massive, towering red neon letters spelled out his name, E-L-V-I-S. He wore a simple, elegant white suit, looking like a lone preacher standing in a dark world. When he began to sing "If I Can Dream," he didn't just use his vocal cords. He used every single ounce of his soul. His voice cracked with genuine, raw emotion. His hands shook, not from fear this time, but from the sheer spiritual weight of the words. By the time he reached the second verse, tears were visibly rolling down his face under the hot studio lights. The horn section stopped looking at their sheet music. The television crew stood frozen in place. Elvis was pouring all his years of cinematic frustration, all his grief for his broken country, and all his desperate longing for personal redemption into that microphone. When the final soaring note faded into the dark room, Elvis was physically exhausted. He was trembling, completely spent, and entirely empty. He had left his heart on that stage. The television special aired in December 1968. It was a monumental, historic triumph. It became the highest-rated television event of the entire year. The critics were absolutely stunned. The world finally realized the truth. The king had not died in the superficial world of Hollywood. He had simply been waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim his throne. He proved to the world, and most importantly to himself, that he was still the most powerful force in American music. These are the rare, beautiful moments that make music immortal. These are the deep stories that remind us of the real human souls behind the legendary voices we still listen to on our record players. If the stories of these timeless legends mean something to your heart, please take a brief moment to subscribe to our channel. Join our growing community of music lovers and let us keep the true spirit of vinyl spinning together. Thank you for walking down memory lane with us tonight. Stay safe, and we will see you in the next chapter.